We will now look at a very useful practical example of navigating to and updating values in list items. So we have our products list here and a number of manufacturers, Wingtips and AdventureWorks, and a number of different products by each manufacturer. Now I have added a web part that displays this data onto our test page, and this is an inbuilt web part that gets created when you create a list or library. What I'm going to do is add some buttons to that page to allow us to navigate to and update the selected data in the list. So we're going to have two buttons, one that updates all products by applying a 10% discount, and one that increases only wingtip products by 20%. The first thing we will do is hook up the event handler for the click of the Update All Products button, and we will write some simple code. So let's have a look at the code. We first of all navigate to our data, so we instantiate an SPWeb object and set it equal to the current web. We then retrieve a reference to the products lists, and then simply, for each item in that product list, we can edit a selected field. So we retrieve the current selling price so that we can do a mathematical calculation on it, and we apply a discount by setting it equal to 0.9 of what it currently is. And then we set that value back and update the product. So very, very simple code. Let's test that out. We can build and deploy our solution and switch to Internet Explorer and refresh our page. And then we can add our web part that contains our controls to this page. So we do that with a very few simple clicks as before. And we navigate to and find our web part, which is in the custom category. And it's our data example web part. And so we have our two buttons there. We have the button for applying a discount across the board, and then the button that we will wire up in a few seconds for increasing just wingtip products. Now look at these values. We have sports helmets by Wingtips and so forth. So we click the button and we are taken to the default view of the list so that we can verify the data is being updated, and indeed it has. So all of these products have been decreased in price by a factor of 0.9. Now let's write a slightly more interesting update statement for updating only wingtip products, i.e. products where the manufacturer is Wingtips. Again, we will hook up an event handler and we will have some similar code, but it has additional features. What we do is navigate to the list as before, but we now create an SP query object. And an SP query object can accept a CAML query, a collaborative application markup language query. So what we will do is first of all define the view fields for the query, and considering we are only updating selling price, we only really need that view field in programmatic terms. And then we can specify a where clause, and the where clause can reference columns or fields that aren't necessarily in the view, but they are used as a criteria. So I'm sure you can imagine that if you've written any SQL statements before, you can imagine that this forms the basis of an SQL query. So we select those into an SP list item collection, and we can iterate through that list item collection and modify the data as appropriate. So rather than retrieving all of the list items from the list and then verifying that each item is from Wingtips, we can say to SharePoint, only get me the items for Wingtips to start with. And this is much more efficient than iterating through an entire list. We can save and build this additional functionality now and deploy it to SharePoint. And we switch to Internet Explorer and refresh the page to ensure our button is wired up appropriately. And when we click the button, we will update only the wingtip products. So there are those items that will be updated. Let's click the button and we are taken to the list again. Notice that AdventureWorks data has not been updated, but the wingtip values have. So this has been a very efficient way to only retrieve those items that we want, and in our case we updated their values as well.